The evening sun painted the sky in shades of amber as Alfre Woodard sat in her Los Angeles home, reviewing scripts that had been sent to her agent. At 61, the acclaimed actress had built a career spanning decades, from her breakthrough role in Cross Creek to her powerful performances in 12 Years a Slave and Luke Cage. Her living room walls displayed awards and photographs from a lifetime dedicated to storytelling, each image capturing moments where she had brought characters to life with remarkable depth and authenticity. Alfre had always been drawn to roles that challenged audiences to think beyond their comfort zones. Growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, she learned early that stories had the power to change hearts and minds. Her parents, who worked tirelessly to provide for their family, instilled in her a deep sense of responsibility to use her platform for meaningful purposes. This philosophy guided every career choice she made, from her early days in theater to her current status as one of Hollywood's most respected performers. That particular evening, she was considering a project about historical figures who had been overlooked by mainstream narratives. The script focused on African leaders who had shaped their nations through courage and vision, yet remained largely unknown to Western audiences. As she read through the pages, her phone rang with an unfamiliar international number displayed on the screen. Normally, she might have let it go to voicemail, but something compelled her to answer. The voice on the other end spoke with a calm authority that immediately commanded attention. The caller identified himself as Ibrahim Traoré, speaking from Burkina Faso. Alfre paused, her mind racing to place the name. She had heard whispers in activist circles about a young military leader in West Africa who had taken power with promises of change and sovereignty. The entertainment industry often buzzed with stories of political upheaval, but rarely did such figures reach out directly to American actors. Ibrahim's English was accented but clear, and he explained that he had been following her work for years. He mentioned specific performances, particularly her role in Fences and her advocacy work for education in underserved communities. His knowledge of her career was surprisingly detailed, suggesting this was not a casual conversation. He spoke about how her performances had resonated with people across different cultures and continents, including in his own country where access to American films was limited, but deeply appreciated when available. As they talked, Alfre found herself drawn into a conversation unlike any she had experienced. Ibrahim spoke passionately about his vision for Burkina Faso, a nation that had struggled with poverty and external interference for decades. He described his efforts to reduce dependence on foreign powers while building local industries and educational systems. His words carried the weight of someone who had seen suffering firsthand and was determined to create change. What struck Alfre most was Ibrahim's genuine curiosity about her perspective on using art as a tool for social change. He asked thoughtful questions about how American artists navigated the balance between entertainment and activism. He wanted to understand how someone could maintain artistic integrity while addressing important social issues. Their conversation flowed naturally from personal experiences to broader philosophical discussions about responsibility and leadership. Ibrahim shared stories about his childhood in rural Burkina Faso, where electricity was sporadic and educational resources were scarce. Despite these challenges, he had excelled academically and eventually pursued military training. His path to leadership had been unexpected, driven by circumstances that demanded action rather than political ambition. He spoke about the weight of responsibility he felt toward his people and his determination to break cycles of dependence that had held the nation back. The call stretched on for nearly 2 hours, with both participants losing track of time. Alfre found herself sharing stories from her own childhood, describing how her parents had emphasized the importance of education and service to community. She talked about the challenges of being a Black actress in Hollywood during different eras, and how she had learned to choose projects that aligned with her values, even when it meant turning down lucrative opportunities. As their conversation continued, Ibrahim revealed why he had reached out to her specifically. He had been inspired by a speech she had given at a film festival about the power of storytelling to bridge cultural divides. He believed that collaboration between African Leaders and influential American artists could help change global perceptions about Africa. Too often, he explained, the continent was portrayed only through narratives of crisis and dependency, overlooking the rich cultures, innovations, and leadership emerging from African nations. Ibrahim proposed an ambitious idea that would require careful consideration. He wanted to invite Alfre to visit Burkina Faso to see firsthand the progress being made and the challenges still faced. More than a publicity visit, he envisioned a genuine cultural exchange that could lead to collaborative projects highlighting African stories and perspectives. He spoke about young filmmakers in his country who had incredible talent, but limited resources and international connections. The conversation concluded with both participants acknowledging that this was just the beginning of what could become a significant relationship. Ibrahim provided his direct contact information and promised to send materials about current projects in Burkina Faso. Alfre agreed to research more about his background and the current situation in his country. They scheduled another call for the following week to continue their discussion. After hanging up, Alfre sat in her living room as darkness settled outside. The conversation had been unexpected and profound, leaving her with more questions than answers. She realized that despite her extensive career and international recognition, there were entire worlds of experience and perspective that remained largely unknown to her. The call had opened a window into a different kind of leadership and a different approach to creating change. She spent the rest of the evening researching Ibrahim Traoré and Burkina Faso, reading about recent political developments and the challenges facing West African nations. The more she learned, the more impressed she became with the complexity of the situation and the courage required to attempt meaningful reform. She began to understand why Ibrahim had reached out to her and what kind of collaboration he might be envisioning. As she prepared for bed that night, Alfre reflected on how unexpected connections could emerge from the most ordinary moments. A simple decision to answer an unfamiliar phone call had led to one of the most thought-provoking conversations of her life, setting in motion possibilities she had never previously considered. The following week passed in a blur of research and reflection for Alfre. She had immersed herself in learning about Burkina Faso's history, from its colonial past as French Upper Volta to its independence and the challenges that followed. She read about Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader who had renamed the country and implemented progressive policies before his assassination in 1987. The parallels between Sankara's vision and Ibrahim's current efforts became increasingly apparent as she delved deeper into the country's complex political landscape. Alfre found herself discussing the conversation with her closest friends and advisors, seeking perspective on this unexpected opportunity. Her longtime friend and fellow actress Viola Davis listened intently as Alfre described Ibrahim's passion and the depth of their initial conversation. Viola, who had her own experiences with international humanitarian work, encouraged Alfre to explore the possibility further while remaining cautious about the political implications. The scheduled follow-up call came on a Wednesday evening, just as Alfre was finishing dinner. This time, she was prepared with questions and had set aside the entire evening for their conversation. When Ibrahim's voice came through the phone, she immediately noticed a weariness that hadn't been present in their first exchange. He explained that it had been a particularly challenging week, dealing with economic pressures and resistance from various factions who opposed his reform initiatives. Ibrahim shared more personal details about his daily life as a leader, describing the constant, balancing act between immediate needs and long-term vision. He talked about waking up each day knowing that thousands of people were counting on decisions he would make. The weight of this responsibility was something Alfre could relate to in her own way, having experienced the pressure of representing her community through her work and public statements. During this second conversation, Ibrahim revealed more about his background and the circumstances that had led to his rise to power. He described growing up in a family that valued education, despite limited resources. His father had been a teacher who emphasized the importance of critical thinking and self-reliance. His mother had been a trader who traveled between villages, giving him early exposure to different communities and their varied challenges. The path to leadership had not been planned or desired, Ibrahim explained. He had been serving in the military when political instability reached a critical point. The previous government had been struggling with security challenges and economic difficulties, creating an environment where change became inevitable. When the opportunity arose to step forward and attempt to provide stability and direction, he felt compelled by duty rather than ambition. Alfre was struck by Ibrahim's humility and his apparent genuine concern for his people's welfare. He spoke about specific initiatives he was implementing, from agricultural programs designed to increase food security to educational reforms aimed at preparing young people for a changing global economy. He described visits to rural communities, where he had seen both the devastating effects of poverty and the incredible resilience of ordinary citizens. The conversation turned to Ibrahim's vision for cultural exchange and storytelling. He explained that he believed narrative control was one of the most important aspects of sovereignty. For too long, he argued, African stories had been told primarily by outsiders who often focused on stereotypes or superficial understanding. He wanted to support local filmmakers and artists while also building bridges with international collaborators who could help amplify authentic African voices. Ibrahim had done his homework about Alfre's career and advocacy work. He mentioned her involvement with educational initiatives and her support for young artists from underrepresented communities. He saw similarities between the challenges facing aspiring artists in American inner cities and those facing creative, young people in Burkina Faso. Both dealt with limited resources and systemic barriers, but both also possessed incredible talent and determination. As their conversation deepened, Ibrahim shared his concerns about external pressures facing his administration. He spoke carefully about international reactions to his leadership and the complex relationships between African nations and global powers. He expressed frustration with how quickly outside observers formed judgments about African leadership without understanding historical context or current realities. Alfre found herself sharing more about her own experiences with being misunderstood or misrepresented in media coverage. She talked about times when her advocacy work had been minimized or mischaracterized, and how she had learned to stay focused on her core mission despite external criticism. The parallel experiences created a deeper connection between them, despite the vast differences in their circumstances. The topic of their potential collaboration became more specific during this call. Ibrahim described a cultural center being planned in Ouagadougou that would include facilities for film production, theater, and other arts. He envisioned it as a place where local and international artists could work together on projects that authentically represented African experiences. He asked if Alfre would consider visiting to see the proposed site and meet with local artists who were eager to learn from her experience. Alfre felt a growing excitement about the possibility, but she also recognized the need for careful planning. A visit by a prominent American actress to Burkina Faso would inevitably attract media attention, and she wanted to ensure that any coverage would be beneficial rather than sensationalized. She asked Ibrahim about security considerations and the current political climate, wanting to understand all aspects of what such a visit might involve. Ibrahim assured her that arrangements could be made for a safe and productive visit. He described other international guests who had visited successfully, including academics and business leaders who had come to explore partnership opportunities. He emphasized that any visit would be structured around meaningful engagement rather than ceremonial appearances. As the call progressed, both participants seemed to recognize that they were moving beyond initial curiosity toward genuine commitment to collaboration. Ibrahim sent Alfre contact information for several filmmakers and educators in Burkina Faso, suggesting she might want to have preliminary conversations with them to better understand the creative community she would be engaging. With the conversation concluded with tentative plans for Alfre to visit Burkina Faso within the next few months. The timing would depend on both her filming schedule and the political situation in the country. They agreed to maintain regular communication as plans developed, with Ibrahim providing updates on conditions and Alfre working with her team to address logistical requirements. After ending the call, Alfre felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The opportunity represented something entirely new in her career, a chance to engage with storytelling and cultural exchange on an international level. At the same time, she recognized the responsibility that would come with such a high-profile collaboration. Every aspect of the visit would be scrutinized, and she wanted to ensure that her involvement would genuinely benefit the people Ibrahim was working to serve. 3 weeks after their second conversation, Alfre received an unexpected package at her Los Angeles home. The delivery contained materials from Burkina Faso that Ibrahim had promised to send, including photographs of the proposed cultural center site, writings by local filmmakers, and a handwritten letter from Ibrahim himself. The letter was written in careful English, expressing his gratitude for her interest and his hopes for their potential collaboration. Among the materials was a documentary film produced by young Burkinabe filmmakers about daily life in rural communities. Alfre watched it alone in her home theater, immediately struck by the authentic voices and perspectives presented. The film avoided both romanticizing poverty and exploiting suffering, instead showing the complexity and dignity of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. She could see the talent Ibrahim had described and understood why he was so passionate about supporting local artists. The package also included a detailed proposal for her visit, outlining a 10-day itinerary that would include meetings with artists, visits to educational programs, and opportunities to see both urban and rural areas of the country. The proposal demonstrated careful thought about how to make the visit meaningful for all participants while ensuring her safety and comfort. It was clear that significant planning had already gone into making this collaboration possible. Alfre shared the materials with her agent and publicist, seeking their professional assessment of the opportunity. Initially, both were cautious about the political implications of such a high-profile visit to a country where the leadership had come to power through military intervention. However, as they reviewed the materials and researched Ibrahim's background, they began to see the potential benefits of the collaboration. Her agent pointed out that Alfre had always been selective about her projects and had consistently chosen work that aligned with her values. A cultural exchange focused on supporting local artists and educational initiatives seemed consistent with her established priorities. Her publicist emphasized the importance of framing any visit as a cultural rather than political engagement, focusing on artistic collaboration rather than endorsement of particular policies. During this period, Alfre also received several video calls from filmmakers in Burkina Faso who Ibrahim had connected her with. These conversations were arranged through secure internet connections and provided her with direct insight into the creative community she would be engaging with. She spoke with Aminata, a young woman who had studied film in Morocco and returned to Burkina Faso to establish a production company focused on stories by and about African women. Aminata shared her struggles to access equipment and funding while maintaining creative independence. She described projects she wanted to develop that would showcase the strength and complexity of African women's experiences, moving beyond stereotypes to present authentic narratives. Her passion and talent were immediately apparent, and Alfre began to envision ways they might collaborate on future projects. She also spoke with Mohammed, a documentary filmmaker who had been working to preserve oral histories from elderly community members. His work focused on capturing traditional knowledge and stories before they were lost to time. He explained how limited resources had forced him to be creative with his approach, often using basic equipment, but achieving powerful results through careful preparation and genuine connection with his subjects. These conversations reinforced Alfre's growing conviction that the visit could create meaningful opportunities for artistic collaboration. She began to see how her experience and connections in the American film industry could genuinely benefit talented artists who simply needed access to resources and international networks. The possibility of mentoring young filmmakers and helping to amplify their voices excited her more than any traditional acting role. As plans for the visit became more concrete, Alfre faced increasing scrutiny from various quarters. Some colleagues in Hollywood expressed concern about the political implications of appearing to endorse Ibrahim's leadership. Others questioned whether she was adequately informed about the complex situation in West Africa. The criticism came from both progressive friends who worried about military governance and conservative voices who opposed any engagement with African political movements. Rather than backing away from the opportunity, Alfre decided to deepen her research and preparation. She consulted with African studies professors, spoke with diplomats who had experience in the region, and connected with other American artists who had engaged in international cultural exchange programs. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that thoughtful engagement was better than distant judgment. She also received encouragement from unexpected sources. Danny Glover, who had his own history of controversial political statements, called to express his support for her planned visit. He shared his experiences traveling to countries whose governments were criticized by American media, emphasizing the importance of seeing situations firsthand rather than relying solely on external perspectives. Whoopi Goldberg offered a different perspective, encouraging Alfre to document her visit extensively so that she could share authentic observations with American audiences. She suggested that the visit could provide valuable education about African realities that were often oversimplified in American discourse. The key, Whoopi emphasized, was maintaining independence and honesty about both positive and negative observations. During this period of preparation, Alfre continued her regular conversations with Ibrahim. She was impressed by his continued openness to her questions and his willingness to address her concerns directly. When she asked about criticism of his government's human rights record, he acknowledged that mistakes had been made while emphasizing his commitment to improvement. His responses seemed genuine rather than rehearsed. Ibrahim also demonstrated flexibility about the structure of her visit. When Alfre expressed interest in meeting with opposition voices and civil society leaders, he agreed to arrange such meetings. He explained that his goal was not to create propaganda, but to foster genuine dialogue and understanding. This willingness to allow unrestricted access increased her confidence in the sincerity of his intentions. The planning process revealed both the opportunities and challenges of international cultural exchange. Simple logistics like visa requirements and security arrangements became complex when dealing with a country experiencing political transition. Alfre's team worked closely with the State Department to ensure that her visit would comply with all relevant regulations while maintaining the independence necessary for authentic artistic collaboration. As the planned departure date approached, Alfre felt increasingly prepared for what would likely be the most significant international engagement of her career. The visit represented more than a simple cultural exchange. It was an opportunity to participate in a new model of South-South collaboration that could influence how American artists engaged with their counterparts around the world. The night before her departure, Alfre received a final call from Ibrahim. His voice carried both excitement and nervousness about her impending arrival. He expressed his gratitude for her willingness to make the journey and his hopes that the visit would exceed her expectations. He also acknowledged the risk she was taking by associating with his administration and promised to do everything possible to ensure that her visit would be safe and productive. Their conversation that evening lasted for over an hour, covering final details of her itinerary and his expectations for what they might accomplish together. By the time she hung up the phone, Alfre felt confident that she was embarking on an adventure that would expand her understanding of the world while potentially creating lasting benefits for the artists and communities she was preparing to encounter. The journey to Burkina Faso took Alfre through Paris, where she had a layover that gave her time to reflect on the magnitude of what she was undertaking. Sitting in Charles de Gaulle Airport, surrounded by travelers from around the world, she felt the weight of stepping into a completely unknown situation. The documentaries and research could only prepare her so much. The reality of experiencing a different culture and political environment would test everything she thought she understood about international engagement. When her flight landed in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, Alfre was struck immediately by the energy of the place. Despite the economic challenges she had read about, the airport buzzed with activity and purpose. People moved with determination, and she could sense the resilience that Ibrahim had described in their conversations. The air was different here, carrying scents and sounds that were completely foreign to her Los Angeles experience. Ibrahim had arranged for a cultural attaché named Fatima to meet Alfre at the airport. Fatima was a woman in her 40s who had studied in France but returned to Burkina Faso to work in educational development. Her English was excellent, and she immediately put Alfre at ease with her warm personality and obvious intelligence. During the drive from the airport, Fatima provided commentary about the neighborhoods they passed through, pointing out both challenges and improvements that had occurred under Ibrahim's leadership. The accommodations arranged for Alfre were in a small hotel that catered to international visitors, but maintained authentic local character. Her room overlooked a courtyard where local musicians often performed in the evenings. The simplicity of the space was refreshing after the luxury she was accustomed to in Los Angeles. She appreciated Ibrahim's choice not to house her in an overly Western environment, recognizing his intention to provide an authentic experience. Her first formal meeting was scheduled for the following morning at the site of the proposed cultural center. Ibrahim arrived precisely on time, accompanied by a small group that included architects, local artists, and community leaders. Alfre was surprised by how young he appeared in person, perhaps even younger than his 34 years. His presence was commanding but not intimidating, and his genuine smile made it clear that he was as excited about this meeting as she was. The site visit revealed the ambitious scope of Ibrahim's vision. The proposed cultural center would occupy several acres in a central location, with facilities for film production, theater performances, traditional music and dance, and educational workshops. Local architects had designed buildings that incorporated traditional Burkinabe architectural elements while providing modern functionality for creative work. The project would provide employment opportunities while preserving cultural heritage. As they walked through the site, Ibrahim explained how the center would operate as both a creative space and an economic development initiative. Local artists would have access to professional equipment and training, but they would also be expected to contribute to the center's sustainability through their work. International collaborators would be invited to share their expertise while learning from local traditions and perspectives. Alfre was impressed by the practical thinking behind the project. Rather than creating a facility that would depend indefinitely on external funding, Ibrahim's team had developed a business plan that emphasized gradual self-sufficiency. They had studied successful models from other countries and adapted them to local conditions. The approach demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that had convinced her to make this visit. During lunch at a local restaurant, Alfre had her first extended conversation with Ibrahim in person. Away from the formal setting of the site visit, she was able to ask more personal questions about his motivations and his vision for the country. Ibrahim spoke passionately about his desire to break cycles of dependency that had limited Burkina Faso's development for decades. He wanted future generations to have opportunities that had been unavailable to his own generation. The afternoon was spent visiting a school that had been established as part of Ibrahim's educational reforms. The facility was modest but well-maintained, with enthusiastic teachers and engaged students. Alfre was invited to speak with a class of teenagers who were studying English. Their questions were thoughtful and demonstrated genuine curiosity about her experiences as an actress and her perspectives on American culture. One student asked how American actors chose roles that could influence social change. The question led to a discussion about the responsibility of public figures and the power of storytelling to challenge assumptions and promote understanding. Alfre was struck by the sophistication of the students' thinking and their obvious hunger for learning. She could see why Ibrahim was so focused on educational development as a foundation for broader progress. That evening, Ibrahim arranged for Alfre to attend a performance by local musicians and dancers. The event took place in an outdoor courtyard, with the community gathering to share traditional entertainment. Alfre was welcomed warmly and invited to participate in several dances, despite her obvious inexperience with the movements. The joy and inclusiveness of the evening reminded her of community gatherings from her own childhood in Oklahoma. During the performance, she observed Ibrahim's interactions with ordinary citizens. His presence was welcomed rather than merely tolerated, and people approached him with both respect and familiarity. Children ran up to greet him, and elderly community members offered advice on various topics. The scene contrasted sharply with typical American political events, where leaders were often separated from the public by security barriers. After the performance, Ibrahim and Alfre walked through the neighborhood, accompanied by minimal security. He explained that building trust with communities required accessibility and genuine engagement. While security concerns existed, isolation from the people he served would undermine his effectiveness as a leader. The balance was delicate, but he believed authentic leadership required taking certain risks. Their conversation that evening covered topics ranging from childhood experiences to philosophical questions about leadership and responsibility. Ibrahim shared stories about his grandmother, who had been a traditional healer and storyteller. She had taught him that knowledge was only valuable when shared with others, and that individual success was meaningless without community benefit. These lessons had shaped his approach to governance and his vision for national development. Alfre found herself sharing memories from her own family, describing how her parents had emphasized service to others and the importance of using talents for meaningful purposes. The parallels in their upbringing, despite vast differences in geography and circumstances, created a foundation for deeper understanding. Both had been raised with values that emphasized collective responsibility over individual achievement. As the evening concluded, Ibrahim outlined plans for the remaining days of her visit. They would travel to rural areas to see agricultural projects and meet with farmers who were implementing new techniques. She would also visit a women's cooperative that was producing textiles for both local use and export. Most importantly, she would spend extensive time with local filmmakers and artists, participating in workshops and discussing potential collaborations. The day had exceeded Alfre's expectations in every way. The warmth of her reception, the sophistication of the cultural center plans, and the genuine engagement she had witnessed from Ibrahim had convinced her that this collaboration could indeed be meaningful. She was beginning to envision specific ways her experience and connections could benefit the talented artists she was meeting. That night, as she sat in her hotel room writing notes about the day's experiences, Alfre reflected on how much her understanding had already evolved. The complexity of the situation was greater than she had anticipated, but so was the potential for positive impact. She felt grateful for Ibrahim's invitation and increasingly committed to making their collaboration as productive as possible. Before going to sleep, she received a text message from Ibrahim thanking her for her open-mindedness and enthusiasm. He expressed his excitement about the remaining days of her visit and his optimism about the projects they might develop together. Reading his message, Alfre felt a growing sense of purpose about this unexpected chapter in her career. The third day of Alfre's visit began with a journey to rural areas outside Ouagadougou. Ibrahim had arranged for her to see agricultural projects that were central to his economic development strategy. The drive took them through landscapes that shifted from urban to rural, revealing the diverse geography and communities that comprised modern Burkina Faso. Along the way, Ibrahim shared stories about the history of different regions and the challenges specific to rural development. Their first stop was a farming cooperative that was implementing drought-resistant agricultural techniques. The farmers, predominantly women, had learned methods that increased crop yields while conserving water resources. Alfre was impressed by the ingenuity of the solutions and the enthusiasm of the participants. The women explained their techniques through translators, but their pride in their accomplishments was evident without words. One farmer, an elderly woman named Mariam, took special interest in showing Alfre her experimental plots. Through Fatima's translation, Mariam explained how she had adapted traditional farming wisdom to incorporate new seeds and irrigation methods. Her yields had increased significantly, enabling her to support her extended family and contribute to community food security. The success stories were individual, but the impact was collective. Ibrahim observed these interactions carefully, clearly taking pride in the progress being made. However, he also pointed out continuing challenges and areas where more support was needed. He showed Alfre fields that had been damaged by irregular rainfall patterns and explained how climate change was creating new obstacles for agricultural communities. His honesty about difficulties impressed her, demonstrating that his optimism was grounded in realistic assessment rather than wishful thinking. The visit to the agricultural project led to a broader discussion about food security and economic sovereignty. Ibrahim explained how dependence on food imports had made Burkina Faso vulnerable to international price fluctuations and supply disruptions. By supporting local agricultural development, his administration was working to create more stability and self-sufficiency. The approach required patient investment in training and infrastructure, but early results were encouraging. Alfre found herself thinking about parallels between rural development challenges in Burkina Faso and similar issues in parts of rural America. Both contexts involved communities that had been marginalized by economic changes and needed targeted support to develop sustainable livelihoods. The specific techniques were different, but the underlying principles of community-based development seemed universal. Their next destination was a vocational training center that specialized in traditional crafts and modern manufacturing techniques. Young people were learning skills ranging from traditional weaving to basic electronics repair. The facility combined respect for cultural heritage with practical preparation for modern economic opportunities. Students moved between workshops where they learned ancient techniques from elderly masters and contemporary skills from younger instructors. At the training center, Alfre participated in a discussion with students about career aspirations and the challenges of balancing tradition with innovation. Many students expressed desire to preserve their cultural heritage while also accessing global economic opportunities. They wanted to maintain connections to their communities while developing skills that could provide stable livelihoods. The Minoan conversation revealed sophisticated thinking about development that avoided simple either-or choices between tradition and modernity. During lunch at the training center, Ibrahim shared more details about his long-term vision for Burkina Faso's development. He described plans for gradually building local manufacturing capacity while maintaining the country's agricultural foundation. The approach emphasized sustainability and community benefit rather than rapid growth that might create inequality or environmental damage. His thinking reflected deep consideration of development models from other countries and their successes and failures. The afternoon brought them to a women's textile cooperative that had become one of the most successful enterprises supported by Ibrahim's economic programs. The women produced traditional fabrics using both ancient techniques and modern equipment. Their products were sold locally but also exported to international markets, providing sustainable income for dozens of families. The quality of their work was exceptional, combining artistic beauty with practical functionality. Alfre spent considerable time with the textile producers, learning about their techniques and hearing their stories. Many had been widows or single, mothers who needed economic opportunities to support their families. The cooperative had provided not just employment, but also training in business management and marketing. The women had developed their own leadership structure and made collective decisions about production and sales. The success of the textile cooperative demonstrated possibilities for development that built on local strengths rather than depending on external investment or imported models. The women had maintained control of their enterprise while accessing technical assistance and market connections. Their pride in their work and their economic independence was obvious, providing a powerful example of development that empowered rather than displaced local communities. As the day progressed, Alfre found herself increasingly moved by the resilience and creativity of the people she was meeting. Despite facing significant challenges, they were finding ways to improve their circumstances through collective effort and mutual support. Their stories challenged stereotypes about African development and revealed possibilities for progress that were often overlooked in international discussions. The journey back to Ouagadougou provided time for reflection and deeper conversation with Ibrahim. Alfre shared her observations about the day's visits and her growing appreciation for the complexity of development work. She asked Ibrahim about the personal costs of his leadership role and how he managed the pressure of responsibility for so many people's welfare. Ibrahim spoke candidly about the isolation that sometimes accompanied leadership and the difficulty of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. He described sleepless nights spent worrying about policy choices and the constant awareness that mistakes could have serious consequences for vulnerable people. The burden was offset by moments like today, when he could see concrete evidence that his administration's programs were making a difference in people's lives. Their conversation touched on the challenges of international perception and the frustration of having his administration judged by external observers who had limited understanding of local context. Ibrahim expressed appreciation for Alfre's willingness to see the situation firsthand, rather than relying solely on media reports or diplomatic assessments. Her visit represented the kind of direct engagement that could lead to more nuanced understanding of African realities. As they approached the capital, Ibrahim outlined plans for the following day, which would focus specifically on the arts community and potential collaborations with American filmmakers and artists. Alfre would meet with the entire group of local filmmakers and participate in workshops about storytelling techniques and international collaboration. The discussions would explore specific projects that might benefit from cross-cultural partnership. That evening, Alfre attended a small dinner with Ibrahim and several of his advisors. The conversation was informal but substantive, covering topics ranging from education policy to international relations. She was struck by the intellectual caliber of the team Ibrahim had assembled and their obvious commitment to their country's development. The group included women and men from diverse backgrounds, suggesting genuine effort to include different perspectives in decision-making. During dinner, the discussion turned to the role of culture in development and the importance of preserving African narratives while engaging with global audiences. Ibrahim's advisors shared their perspectives on how storytelling could challenge stereotypes and promote more accurate understanding of African experiences. They expressed enthusiasm about potential collaborations with American artists, but emphasized the importance of maintaining African creative control. The evening concluded with traditional music performed by local artists. The performance was intimate and powerful, showcasing the rich cultural heritage that Ibrahim's administration was working to preserve and promote. Alfre participated in the music making, learning simple percussion techniques and joining in call and response, singing. The experience reminded her of the universal power of music to create connection across cultural boundaries. Before retiring for the night, Alfre spent time writing detailed notes about the day's experiences. The visits to rural projects had deepened her understanding of the development challenges facing Burkina Faso, while also revealing the strength and creativity of local communities. She was beginning to see specific ways that her experience and connections could support ongoing efforts while respecting local leadership and priorities. The final days of Alfre's visit centered on the arts community that had originally inspired Ibrahim to reach out to her. The morning began at a small film studio where local filmmakers had gathered to share their work and discuss potential collaborations. The space was modest but functional, equipped with basic digital cameras and editing equipment that the filmmakers had pooled their resources to purchase. Despite limited resources, the quality of their work was remarkable, demonstrating creativity and technical skill that could compete with productions from much better funded environments. Aminata, the young filmmaker Alfre had spoken with during her preparation, presented a short documentary about women entrepreneurs in rural areas. The film captured intimate moments of daily life while exploring broader themes about economic empowerment and social change. Her cinematography was sophisticated, using natural lighting and careful composition to create visually striking scenes that enhanced rather than distracted from the storytelling. Alfre was impressed by the artistic maturity evident in someone so young. Mohammed followed with excerpts from his oral history project, which combined traditional storytelling with contemporary documentary techniques. He had recorded elderly community members sharing folk tales and historical accounts, then woven these narratives together with images of modern life. The result was a meditation on continuity and change that honored the past while acknowledging present realities. His work demonstrated how traditional African storytelling traditions could inform contemporary filmmaking. The screening session revealed a diverse artistic community with varied interests and approaches. Some filmmakers focused on social issues and political themes, while others explored personal relationships and family dynamics. Some worked in documentary formats, while others experimented with fiction and experimental techniques. The diversity suggested a vibrant creative culture that could produce many different types of stories for various audiences. Following the screenings, Alfre led a workshop on acting techniques and character development. She shared methods she had learned throughout her career, demonstrating how to find authentic emotion and create believable characters. The local actors were eager students, asking detailed questions about preparation techniques and the relationship between actors and directors. Their enthusiasm reminded her of her own early days in theater when every lesson felt like a revelation. The workshop evolved into a collaborative session where local actors performed scenes from their own scripts while Alfre provided feedback and suggestions. She was struck by the natural talent of the performers and their instinctive understanding of dramatic truth. Many had learned their craft through community theater and informal training, developing skills through practice rather than formal education. Their performances had an authenticity that sometimes eluded more technically trained actors. During lunch, the conversation turned to practical questions about international collaboration and the film industry. The local filmmakers wanted to understand how American actors chose projects and how the industry decided which stories to tell. They were particularly interested in how independent filmmakers could access funding and distribution networks. Alfre shared her experiences while acknowledging that the American system had its own challenges and limitations. Ibrahim joined the group for the afternoon session, participating in discussions about how film and storytelling could support his administration's development goals. He was particularly interested in how authentic African stories could reach international audiences and challenge stereotypes about the continent. The filmmakers shared ideas for projects that could showcase Burkina Faso's culture and progress, while addressing universal themes that would resonate with global viewers. The discussion led to concrete planning for potential collaborations. Alfre proposed a mentorship program that would connect American filmmakers with their Burkinabe counterparts for ongoing support and guidance. She also suggested organizing a film festival that would showcase African filmmaking while providing networking opportunities with international distributors. The ideas generated excitement among the local artists, who saw possibilities for expanding their reach while maintaining creative independence. As the afternoon progressed, the emotional weight of the visit began to affect Alfre deeply. She found herself moved by the talent and determination of the artists she was meeting, and by their eagerness to share their stories with the world. Their circumstances reminded her of her own early struggles in Hollywood, when opportunities were limited and success required both talent and perseverance. The difference was that these artists faced additional barriers related to geography and limited infrastructure. Ibrahim noticed Alfre's emotional response and suggested a private conversation. They walked to a quiet corner of the studio where they could speak without interruption. Alfre found herself unexpectedly tearful as she tried to express her feelings about the visit. The combination of witnessing such talent in challenging circumstances and recognizing the potential for meaningful collaboration had created an overwhelming emotional response. She told Ibrahim that his initial phone call had opened her eyes to possibilities she had never imagined. The visit had challenged her assumptions about Africa and about development, while also inspiring her to think differently about her own role as an artist and advocate. She realized that her privileged position in the American entertainment industry came with responsibilities she had not fully recognized before. Ibrahim listened thoughtfully as Alfre shared her reflections. He expressed gratitude for her openness to the experience and her willingness to see beyond superficial impressions. He explained that her emotional response was precisely what he had hoped for, because it suggested that she truly understood the human dimension of the challenges and opportunities they had discussed. Authentic collaboration required emotional as well as intellectual engagement. Their conversation was interrupted by Fatima, who brought news that had just arrived from international media sources. A major American entertainment publication had learned about Alfre's visit and was preparing to publish a story about her collaboration with Ibrahim. The news created immediate concern about how the story might be framed and what impact it could have on both Alfre's career and Ibrahim's administration. The remainder of the afternoon was spent in crisis management mode, with Alfre's team in Los Angeles coordinating with Ibrahim's communications staff to develop appropriate responses to media inquiries. They wanted to ensure that coverage focused on the cultural and artistic aspects of the collaboration rather than political implications. The challenge was maintaining the authentic spirit of the visit while managing inevitable speculation about Alfre's motivations and Ibrahim's intentions. Despite the media complications, the visit concluded with a celebration organized by the arts community. Local musicians, dancers, and storytellers presented a program that showcased the rich cultural heritage Ibrahim was working to preserve and promote. Alfre was invited to participate in several performances, joining traditional dances and adding her voice to communal songs. The evening felt like a genuine cultural exchange rather than a diplomatic formality. During the celebration, several young artists approached Alfre individually to thank her for her visit and to express their hopes for continued collaboration. Their gratitude was deeply personal, reflecting their appreciation for being seen and valued by someone from the international entertainment community. She realized that her presence had provided validation for their work and encouragement for their aspirations. As the evening wound down, Ibrahim presented Alfre with a traditional textile created by the women's cooperative she had visited. The fabric was beautiful and symbolic, representing the connection between traditional crafts and contemporary economic development. He explained that the gift was meant to remind her of the people she had met and the stories she had heard during her visit. Alfre's final morning in Burkina Faso was spent in a private meeting with Ibrahim, reviewing the visit and discussing next steps for their collaboration. Both acknowledged that the media attention would create new challenges, but they remained committed to the artistic and cultural goals that had brought them together. They agreed to maintain regular communication and to work together on developing specific projects that could benefit from international partnership. The flight home gave Alfre time to process the emotional and intellectual impact of her experience. She found herself changed by the visit in ways she was still discovering. The week had challenged her assumptions, expanded her understanding of global interconnection, and inspired her to think more broadly about her responsibilities as an artist. The tears that had surprised her during her conversation with Ibrahim reflected a deep recognition of both the challenges and possibilities she had witnessed. Looking out the airplane window as they flew over the African continent, Alfre felt a profound sense of gratitude for Ibrahim's invitation and for the trust that the Burkinabe artist had placed in her. The visit had begun with a simple phone call, but it had evolved into something much more significant. She knew that this experience would influence her choices and priorities for years to come, creating new possibilities for meaningful work there.